Sciutto, who is live for us on Capitol Hill. Jim, you have some new reporting on what the U.S. is sending Ukraine.
That's right. As President Zelensky prepares to address Congress just behind me here and ask the U.S. for additional military assistance, I'm told that the U.S. and its NATO allies are already sending additional air defense systems. These are surface-to-air missile systems, not the S-300, which is something that Zelensky has asked for, and other both Democratic and Republican senators have been talking about, an effort still underway to get that system, but other Soviet-era missile systems. They're known as the SA-8, 10, 12, and 14. These are also surface-to-air missile systems, mobile systems, that have an altitude range, low and medium altitude, not as high an altitude as the S-300, but a greater altitude, allows the Ukrainian military to hit targets at a higher altitude than the shoulder-fired Stinger missiles we've been talking a lot about in recent weeks. So this would be, once these get into the country, and I'm told that they are on their way, they've been sourced and on their way into Ukraine, would give the Ukrainian military an ability to better defend itself, not just against Russian aircraft, but it also, these systems give them the capability to strike incoming cruise missiles fired often from Russian territory. So this shows that the military assistance that the U.S. and its NATO partners are sending to Ukraine is expanding. These systems on the way to better help Ukraine defend itself against what are really just relentless Russian attacks.
It raises the possibility, interesting one, that the Ukrainian forces grow stronger with higher capabilities the longer this conflict goes on.
Yeah.
Jim, I want your take on this because you have now lived through these weeks and weeks of back and forth, the talks of negotiations. A lot of interesting language over just the last few hours from both the Ukrainians and the Russians. Zelensky says the Russians are becoming more realistic. Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, claiming that specific language might be within reach. What's going on here?
Well, it's interesting to watch the language from both sides. The give, and again, this is perception from the outside. We don't know what's happening on the table between these two parties, but at least in public statements, you don't see the Russians asking publicly anymore for what they've called denazification. The government of Ukraine is not a Nazi government. Zelensky, as we've noted many times himself, Jewish, but that's a term that Russia has used to get rid of this government and replace it with its own pro-Putin, pro-Russian government. That is something Russians aren't talking about anymore. You also see something of a change in language from the Ukrainians about NATO membership. A discussion, and even Antony Blinken was talking about this morning, that it is not realistic to imagine that Ukraine would become a member of NATO anytime soon, that the possibility that Ukraine might take that demand off the table initially, as long as it gets security guarantees, right? That Russia will not invade again, that Russia makes a commitment and its allies make a commitment. That's movement, right? It brings you sort of from here to here, perhaps, if they stick to those commitments. The question is, how do you get from here to here? An agreement, a meeting of the minds that ends the hostilities on the ground. By the way, Ukrainians say Russian forces got to go, right? They can't remain in the country in any way, shape, or form that they're going to be satisfied with.
Yeah, there's all the reasons in the world to be skeptical of this, but at the same time, the change in language over the last several hours is unmistakable and bears watching. Jim Sciutto, thank you so much for being with us.